Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Jake Bowtell Sports Experience, the podcast that can't be killed. I'm going to say it again. I started saying that last week. I'm saying it again. We are deep in the midst of our NFL division previews. We've done the AFC. All four of those are out. You can go check those out. But we're getting into the NFC today. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself, Minnesota Jack, and the great Oklahoman himself, Mr. David Vaughan, joining us from the Panhandle. How are we, chaps?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, doing well.
Doing well, loving life right now.
I just realized I've used the word chaps normally on the Chaps Chat Cats podcast, so it's a bit of crossover there, a little bit of
the chaps works. It's still a general term for good fellows.
It counts.
That's right, it does. We are battling our way through winter. David's sweating his way through summer. Let's cast our attentions to the NFC North, gentlemen. David, you're going to lead off the chat. The way this works, we each take a team. We give a bit of a rundown, a bit of a cheat sheet for you, the viewer, the listener. And then at the end of the episode, we come together to determine our division standings with the reigning division champs, the Detroit Lions.
So, yeah, Detroit coming off that 12-5 campaign in the regular season, the NFC North defending champions, looking to do something they haven't done in 30 years, and that's go back-to-back. They made it all the way to the NFC Championship game last year where they lost a heartbreaker to San Francisco, a game that they had won by all rights, and they just squandered it there in the fourth quarter. I look at this Detroit Lions team, and, they could go so many different directions. It's like they could continue where they, off where they've been. They could revert. And so, if you look at it, you're like, okay, so you really, with this team, you really do kind of need to do your homework with this squad. They made moves to bolster both their offensive and defensive lines. And so they did well with their linebackers on both sides of the ball, and they locked down Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, and Penei Sewell long-term. And that was huge. I mean, if they get those three, that's big for them. They lost a lot, though, in the offseason, too. They lost Zach Ertz. They lost Anthony Pittman. They lost Will Harris, rather. But they were able to get younger. They created some cap space, and they maintained their strengths. And so you look at this squad, and you're like, okay, so, all right, so what do we have here? Can they maintain their performance level? Well, I think the question is answered rather simply by whether or not you trust the coaching of Dan Campbell. And I feel like we'll actually get to discuss this here in a minute or so. I'm not going to pretend to speak for you guys. I trust Dan Campbell. Personal opinion here, I think he's the best coach in the NFL. At the moment, I think he's the best coach. I think he's done the best job. He took that team from, the absolute cellar to 3 minutes away from glory.
Yeah.
In not very long at all did it take him to do that. And his players have bought in. All those players would run through a brick wall for that man. And I have no reason whatsoever to think that they're actually going to slip. I think they're going to go 13-4 this year. I think they're going to win the NFC this year. And I think they're going to be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. What do you guys think?
I'm not far away from that. I know that Jacko might have another sleeper team in the division. Just on Dan Campbell, I think what I love about him is, we were just chatting about him yesterday, actually, saying that he comes across as a real hard-ass coach. But in some ways, he's a real sort of cheerleading, player-first type of coach under the guise of being a hard ass. I don't think he's a person that his players would dislike. I don't think he runs a hard training session in the sense of that, he's getting everyone to run like gases. after training and people are resenting it. I think he's much loved. And I actually think he's an underrated decision maker. Not only talking about in-game, but the staff hires he's chosen to make, the personnel hires they've chosen to make. I think that's the sort of stuff that impresses me most and might be his most underrated skill, is that from 1,000 yards away, he seems to be a dude who knows what he doesn't know. And I think that's a valuable sort of commodity.
What was it that Socrates said? I'm wise enough to know that I know nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
I like that.
Modern day Socrates.
I wouldn't say he knows nothing, but no, you're right. He's aware of his weaknesses and he avoids them. And that's the sign of any good, true leader. Because so many people make the mistake of, okay, well, I know where my weakness is. I'm going to get right up against that razor's edge of those weaknesses. Dan Campbell's very much the opposite. He's like, no, I'm going to stay as far away from those weaknesses as I can.
Mm.
What happens then is it kind of does tend to turn into, they become predictable at times because they know he's going to stay away from his weaknesses.
Mm.
You can kind of get a beat on what he's doing. Having said that, I think his strengths are strong enough that it certainly overcomes those weaknesses.
Yeah. I want to save your. I kind of know where you're going, so I'm going to save it for our predictions part.
Cool. Let's do it.
Yeah. So let's go. I'm going to talk about the Green Bay Packers. 2023. Obviously, the end of the Aaron Rodgers era. He went to New York. The beginning of the Jordan Love era. The Packers obviously setting out to prove is all you need is love. Well, not quite. They had a 3-6 start to the season. That gave way to a 9-8 finish, included big wins over the Chiefs and at Detroit and at Minnesota. A 48-32 thrashing of the Cowboys in the wild card round was a result that really stunned you when you turned on the TV. Heartbreaker of a loss, 21-24 to the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs. They had a bit of sort of churn on the roster. Linebacker Devondre Campbell went to San Francisco. He contributed 11 starts, 75 tackles last year. Offensive guard John Runyon to the Giants. He started all 19 games in 2023, but saw his snap count start to sort of dwindle across the back half of the season. Running back Aaron Jones crosses to the divisional rival Vikings after 7 seasons in Green Bay. He played 11 games last season, managed 889 combined yards, 3 touchdowns. Offensive tackle David Bakhtiari, a stalwart of the Aaron Rodgers era. He was released, still floating out there as a free agent. Now, they retained A.J. Dillon, who was the running back, meant to be the backup last year, but he actually played more snaps than Aaron Jones did. He is set to go behind Josh Jacobs, who they brought in from the Raiders. They also signed safety Xavier McKinney from, I believe, the New York Giants. Started 17 games for New York in 2023, 11 passes defended, 3 picks, and 78 tackles. And at the draft, they add offensive lineman Jordan Morgan from Arizona with pick 25. He started 12 games for the Wildcats in 2023. My big question around the Packers this season, I suppose, is can they replicate what they did in the back half of 2023? They were pretty abhorrent in the first half. Brilliant to watch down the stretch. The thing that stays with me from this season, though, is that pick that Jordan Love threw to end their campaign in the playoffs. I went back and had a look at the context of that throw, because sometimes you could excuse if it was like 4th down and a mile, it's a desperation heave, you've got to have it, so he tries to make a play. This was 1st and 10 from their 36 with 52 seconds left and 2 timeouts still in hand. It was truly a needless throw to make. I think they've got better and younger at a key position, which is running back. I think Josh Jacobs, is 3 years younger than Aaron Jones. I think that's great, but Jordan Love, just that throw sticks with me. It haunts me. because they were so close to going to the conference championship game, and they really threw it away. And I just my question is, can Jordan Love know when to release it and when to just maybe just chuck it away, to walk away from a broken play, because it cost them essentially last season. Do you want to pivot straight into the Vikings?
Sure, we can get straight into
let's rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah. This, as a Vikings fan, I took a lot of time with this one, so this is going to maybe take a little bit, but we've got to get over everything.
A visit to the therapy couch?
Yes, I think I'm a Minnesota fan. I'm always taking a visit to the therapy couch, all right? That's just the existence. So looking back on 2023, I mean, what a wild ride for the Vikings. They started their hopeful campaign with an 0-3 start, and despite winning the following week, a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs bound them to a 1-4 record. This was far from the start the organization had expected off the back of a playoff appearance, the star quarterback and wide receiver duo, an exciting new coach in his second year. However, the season was not over. They reeled off back-to-back wins, including a massive upset over the 49ers, and it looked like another win was in the books against the Packers, which would take them to a 4-4 record, which is far from season over. However, while they did get the win, it came at a cost. Kirk Cousins suffered an Achilles injury, and he never saw the field again. Now, you'd forgive the Vikings for falling apart after that, but to their credit, inspired by the play of a rocket scientist, they continued their winning streak and won back-to-back games with Josh Dobbs under center. But the magical storyline could go no further, and the rocket was brought back to earth. The Vikings only won one more game for the entire year. Now, the Vikings are going to look quite different going into 2024. The acquisitions of running back Aaron Jones and tight end Robert Tonyan will complement an already impressive offensive side of football, but the defensive moves are the eye-catching ones, with defensive end Jonathan Greenard, linebacker Andrew Van Ginkel, with the Viking hair too, must be remembered, and defensive tackle Jerry Tillery are all primed to make a big impact for Brian Flores' defense. But with quarterback Kirk Cousins out the door and defensive end Daniil Hunter choosing Houston to call home, it's not all positive on the player movement front. Now, the QB room started as a competition between first-round pick J.J. McCarthy and veteran journeyman Sam Darnold, who came from the 49ers as their backup. But a tragic meniscus injury in the preseason ended JJ's season. This leaves Darnold as the one man to reignite Minnesota's hopes of lifting up the Lombardi. Now, for me, when I think about the Vikings and what I'm wondering about for this season, is what will the Vikings make of this season? Will Kevin O'Connell view this year as an in-between one, especially with their exciting young quarterback sidelined, and use 2024 as an opportunity to test out some depth on the roster and then prepare for 2025? Or do KOC and company have faith in Darnold, who has never had close to this much talent around him, and believe that any team with Justin Jefferson, let alone the other talent, should be looking to compete?
You'd have to think, David, that Kevin O'Connell is an upgrade over who was Sam Darnold's play caller. It was the guy who was the head coach for the Dolphins. He was an offensive coordinator for the Broncos. Had the crazy eyes.
Crazy.
Oh, goodness.
Why can't I remember his name? Adam Gase.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
You'd have
press conferences with Adam Gase. Some weird press conferences.
I think that Sam Darnold is underrated as a quarterback. I think that he, I think he's kind of a victim of circumstance. Every now and then you get players like that in the NFL that are better than their statistics would indicate. I think Sam Darnold is one of those. He's a better quarterback than what he has been able to show, really through no fault of his own. Now, I mean, I'm not saying he's a flawless quarterback by any means, but I mean, he's a capable quarterback.
The template for the Vikings is Baker Mayfield at Tampa Bay. That's what they're hoping out of this situation, is that they get a quarterback who maybe hasn't had a whole lot of success at other teams, but all of a sudden comes to a better organization, more talent around him. And I forget what contract he got, but Baker got a massive contract in the offseason of the season he had in Tampa Bay. So I think that's, seeing Sam Darnold to become Patrick Mahomes. Right. But I think if we could get Baker Mayfield kind of production, I think that they would be more than happy with that.
I'll tell you what I agree with you. He's not going to. He's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. They don't need him to be Patrick Mahomes. They need him to be Joe Flacco.
Yeah, that's another good call. Yeah.
And if he's Joe Flacco, they're going to make some noise. You know, he may not win them a ton of games, but he's absolutely not going to lose them very many games. And so that's what they need. That's what they need. They need a Joe Flacco type quarterback, and I think Sam Darnold fits that bill.
Yeah. It's funny. We always, it shouldn't have been that surprising, really, that Baker Mayfield went to Tampa Bay and was successful, because you think about where some of these like first round promising QBs land, they're always landing in bad spots.
Yeah.
Almost invariably. It's so hard for most of them to do what CJ Stroud did and transcend the roster. So yeah, I'll be fascinated to see. I'm going to pivot us here into our final team, and then we can get into some discussion. And it's a good spot to go because we can talk a bit about a first round quarterback. The Chicago Bears, they had a 2-7 start with a few crushing losses to the Packers, Chiefs, and Chargers. Now they rallied down the stretch. 5-3 record in their last 8 games. It included an impressive 28-13 win over Detroit. The Bears' defense, in particular, rallied. They bowed up down the stretch. They conceded scores of 20 or more points in 7 of their first 9 games, but just twice in their final 8. They've turned a few things over, though, during the offseason in terms of their player personnel. Justin Fields gets shipped to Pittsburgh for the cost of just a conditional 6th-round pick. He flashed some tantalizing upside, but was unable to consistently impress enough to keep his job in Chicago. Offensive guard Cody Whitehair, a veteran O-lineman, departs to the Raiders. Running back Deonta Foreman and wide receiver Darnell Mooney, both sent elsewhere. They retained cornerback Jalen Johnson, played 14 games in 2023, 10 passes defended and 4 picks. They draft, of course, Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick, 93 touchdowns and 14 interceptions in 37 games of college football, to go with 27 touchdowns on the ground and nearly 1,000 yards rushing. To complement Caleb Williams, they add wide receiver Keenan Allen and tight end Gerald Everett. The big question for me, lads, is, are the Bears getting good? They certainly seem to have gotten smarter. And this sort of ties into the discussion I had with you guys about Dan Campbell. If you flash back to early 2023, they gave up the number 1 overall pick to the Panthers in order to acquire DJ Moore from Carolina. We know that number 1 pick became Bryce Young, who so far hasn't looked great. So they got DJ Moore, who was easily their best wide receiver last year. They also got the number 9 selection in that draft and a first-round pick in 2024 that turns out to be Caleb Williams. So as it stands right now, they traded away the number 1 pick in 2023 and in return got DJ Moore, who had 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns last year, plus Caleb Williams this year. That's an all-time pants-pulling down type move there. And that was a season last year where they actually started to make some strides, so they've made some gains on defense. They add a talented QB in the draft. They add Keenan Allen to DJ Moore. The run defense was good last year. It was top 5 in a number of stats last season. Their secondary snagged the equal most interceptions in the league. I'm going to pivot to you here, Jack. Are Chicago going to be the NFC's biggest risers in 2024?
Yes.
So talk to me. We're getting into the predictions.
Yeah.
David has said Detroit. Where are you going?
Chicago all the way. Chicago's winning this division, I think, clearly. I not only have them winning the division, I have them going to the Super Bowl. I have them as my NFC pick for the Super Bowl. I think you've got a team that, you flash up again what their record was to end the year.
5-3 in their last 8.
So you end the season with that kind of record, with a quarterback in Justin Fields, who was like fine and like had some good moments, but
scattershot.
Yeah, and also had some really bad moments too. Like, this team has only improved, and I'm willing to be wrong here, but I'm buying into the Caleb Williams hype. I think he's going to be genuinely amazing. And I mean, you look at the Texans as an example of when you have an incredibly talented young quarterback come in, what kind of an effect he can have on an organization. And this Chicago team, I mean, it's all predictions. We have no idea how these players are actually going to be. But based on what we know, Chicago has way better talent around their quarterback than Houston did last year. And Houston won a playoff game. So you kind of go, and the other thing too is people will go, but it's, so unlikely for a rookie quarterback to, go that far, like as far as I'm saying, going to the Super Bowl. And that is true. That does happen very rarely. But it isn't that uncommon for rookie quarterbacks to get close. Rookie quarterbacks take their teams to the playoffs, win playoff games, even to conference championships on a somewhat regular basis, that it's not completely out of the blue. And so I don't see. So to me, the division is clearly for the Bears here, because I think the Lions are going to be good. I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff by any stretch. So I think that'll be the main competition. And I think the Packers are going to see a bit of a slide with Jordan Love. I don't know if he's going to be able to necessarily capture that form. I'm always a little bit suspicious with the quarterback when we see them for a sort of shorter period really kind of impress. I don't want to fall into that too quickly and just assume that that's going to be the case next year. And as much as I'd love the Vikings to, be a real threat, there's too many questions around Sam Darnold and how he's actually going to perform. So I don't think, I don't know how this team that had a winning record last year doesn't bank an extra 3 or 4 wins based on Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen and Gerald Everett, plus already that defense that was quite impressive. I think I'm very certain they're going to win the division. Super Bowl pick is just a fun, are they going to be my NFC representative? But if we're talking about the division here today, I think that they're the obvious winner.
What puts in your mind, David, Detroit over Chicago? What are the question marks you have around the Bears that maybe you don't have so much around Detroit?
Caleb Williams, actually. Watching him in college, he had a sub 500 record against teams over 500 in college. I mean, he had a gaudy record, but he was sub 500 against winning teams. He doesn't read secondaries well. That's always been the knock on him. And in a division, and especially in a league that prides itself on takeaways via the air, that's where I think Caleb Williams may struggle. The other issue that I have with Caleb Williams is his maturity. He's highly immature. And I'm not even talking from a physical standpoint. And I think that he may have some locker room issues that he's going to have to overcome before they ever take that step. Now, am I going to sit here and say that he's never going to be successful? Absolutely not. He certainly has the talent. I've seen him play in person. I know what he can do. I just don't think immediately he's going to have that kind of pop. He has the tools, but if we look at, I think for me, the more interesting comparison is not Chicago and Detroit, but rather Chicago and Minnesota. Take the quarterbacks out of the issue. Who has the better squad? And then you add in Sam Darnold and his experience and his maturity versus Caleb Williams and his lack of it. And I have a hard time seeing Chicago even finishing ahead of Minnesota, let alone ahead of Detroit. And that's why I have such a hard time crowning Chicago. If they did win, it would be the feel-good story. Well, I would say it would be the feel-good story of the decade, but that was Detroit last year. But I think it would impress, and I think it would definitely turn heads. I just don't see Caleb Williams having that kind of moxie right now. And again, that's not to say he won't ever have it.
I'm going to split the difference here. I don't have them winning the division. I'd be comfortable slotting them in like second or third. I think I'm with you in terms of the Vikings. Like, I would probably put them in fourth, simply because with Darnold, I need to see it. Like what I've seen so far. Like he did get opportunities at times to lead the 49ers in 1 or 2 games last season, and I thought he played okay. He played okay in Carolina at times as well when he was there. But I really need to see it. I need to see him put it together, because it's one thing to have the weapons. It's another thing to build the chemistry with them. And so I need to see that. So it's a prove it to me sort of thing. So I think they'll be really competitive, but I'd still probably put them in fourth. Packers and Bears are the 2 and 3 for me. I think I'm fascinated with Caleb Williams because he is such a divisive figure. Like in college, like there did become, by the end of his college career, it was either you loved him or hate him sort of thing. You know, whether it was the fingernail polish and just like the general sort of persona, like it really, really did divide opinion. I think he's the kind of quarterback that if they get off to a winning start, it'll be lightning in a bottle and they'll be unstoppable. I'm more interested to see is what happens if they come out the gate and it's testing. You know, like that'll be the test, I suppose, of how much he's matured or grown since leaving college and entering the pro system. Is how does he manage the ups and downs of an NFL season, because it is a lot harsher than a college football season. You don't get, to go and play Alcorn State or, someone and then have a bye week and reset. Like every week someone is coming for you and they're paid to come for you, sort of thing. So I'm going to go Vikings last.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Lions first. How do you guys want to slot Bears and Packers?
Well, I'm obviously very high on the Bears. So I feel like the compromise of putting them at 2 feels very apt. But that's my 2 cents. What about you, David?
I actually have a completely different order altogether. Okay, so I have Green Bay 4th.
Okay.
I have Green Bay 4th, Chicago 3rd, Minnesota 2nd, and Detroit winning the division somewhat handily.
Okay. So should we put the Packers 4th? Because where would you have them? 3rd?
Yeah.
So you've got them 3rd. I said I'd be happy 2 or 3. David's got them bottom. So sort of by aggregate, let's put the Packers 4th.
I think that makes sense.
Let's go Vikings 3rd.
Yeah.
Because David had them 2nd. You and I, that rises them 1 spot. And then we'll go Lions 1, Bears 2.
Yeah. People know I've put on the record that I think Bears are going to win the division. Exactly. But this exercise, we can put the Bears 2nd.
All right. I like that. This is.
I tell you what. Why don't we make this a little interesting? Let's do a package of Twinkies versus some Tim Tams over the winner of the division.
Perfect.
I love it. Love the sound of that.
We've got it recorded here. The Bears finish first. It's a pack of Twinkies back this way. If the Lions finish first, it's a pack of Tim Tams that way. Perfect. I love it.
One last thing I wanted to say on the Lions, and I feel like you kind of alluded to it at the start of your sort of bit, David, and why I feel like I wonder how well they're going to perform. Not that I think they're going to have any kind of serious drop-off. Is when you've been an organization that has been steeped in mediocrity and horribly, like, if that's been your culture for so long, and I love Dan Campbell. We all love Dan Campbell here. He's great, an amazing coach, and he has turned this team around. But it's a big ask to say, hey, back it up. Do it again. Especially with, I feel like, even though we all sort of have different opinions on the standings for the division, I think we'd all agree it seems like it's going to be a pretty competitive division. And so with that being the case, I would not be surprised in the least if the Lions win the division. But I think, speaking of question marks for Chicago, that would be my big question mark of Detroit is do they have the culture there, and do they have the players there that can back it up again? And there are small margins in this league, and you only need to drop a little bit here, drop a little bit there, and all of a sudden you've lost a few games that you would have expected to win last year. And I love Jared Goff, but I also still always have a bit of question mark around him. If sometimes, we'd watch games of him and be like, oh, there's a Goff moment. He'd do a Goff thing. And credit to both himself and Dan Campbell for turning him into a really productive quarterback. But again, Jared Goff, can you back it up? Because people have had this perception of you for so long. All of a sudden people are starting to respect your name a little bit more, as they should. But can you actually back that up in the next year? That's a bit of a question mark for me.
Well, I'll just say too that, because we've got to wrap it up with this. We've crossed our half hour, but we're talking a lot about Caleb Williams and all these sorts of things. The sneaky little storyline might be, can the Bears back up defensively what they did in the last 2 months? Because that's sort of like, regardless, they went 5-3 with pretty up and down quarterback play down the stretch. Their defense really became quite good. And that is meant to be Matt Eberflus's calling card. He was a defensive coordinator. So they could hold the key ultimately in 2024. If the Bears come out and are miserly and hard to play against, then that might actually make Caleb Williams' role a little bit easier.
Less pressure on him.
Yeah. All right, let's call it there. We've got the NFC.
I said, well, it's a lot easier for a rookie. It's a lot easier for a rookie quarterback to score 17 points than 31. Plus, going back to what Jack said earlier about the culture, the Chicago Bears have forever been known for their defense, the Terrors of the Midway. That since the early 1900s, they've been known for their defense. And even when they were pretty bad, it wasn't their defense, it was just offensive ineptitude.
It's fascinating. We're sort of seeing a flipping of the script, in that sort of the teams that have been traditionally bullied by the Packers and the Vikings, say, in the 21st century, are kind of rising to the top. Yeah. We're now seeing this fight between the Lions and the Bears. What a great animal duel. Lions v Bears. That's all for our NFC North Division preview. You'll have the NFC East coming out in a few days' time. Make sure you go back and check out the AFC ones as well. We'd love for you to hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But until next time, get some football up ya.